Hello and welcome to episode 93 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I am delighted to be joined by Sarah Novatt. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now we are here to talk about Remy and his total colonic Hirschsprungs,
Yep.
and possibly to talk a little bit about genetics as well. It's all, yeah, it's all very, very interesting stuff. I know we were talking a little bit off air about genetics and how. So I mean, I'm fascinated by it. So it's going to be really interesting story. But entirely up to you where you'd like to start from. So please, floor is yours.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how much of the genetics we go into, considering two people without MDs trying to speak on the scientific piece of it. So we'll leave that to the end if we get there.
Yeah, yeah.
But kind of the beginning is that, as I was mentioning to you off air, my husband has Hirschsprungs. His aunt and uncle also have it. So we always knew that it was a familial possibility when we went to start our family. And what was really interesting is when we started speaking to the OBs and we said, Hirschsprung runs in our family, and they basically told us there's nothing you can do about it in utero or preventative. And every single appointment, I would go and say, okay, but just as a reminder, my husband has Hirschsprung's. And they kind of not brushed us off, but they didn't acknowledge it in the way that I thought they were going to. And then my daughter was born in 2021. And you know that as anyone who's somewhat familiar with Hirschsprung, you just wait for that first poop. You are just like, your fingers are crossed. And with her, it happened within a couple of hours. And it was all of a sudden this huge sigh of relief, and all of this tension just went away that I didn't even know I'd been holding for 9 months. And when we got pregnant 2 years later, we went through the same thing and it was a little bit of a harder pregnancy. There were just some complications, which I always think maybe was kind of the first sign that something was wrong. But every OB appointment with the pediatrician, just so you know, Hirschsprung is in our family and continuing, there's nothing we can do about it. And when Remy was born, we were at a hospital in New York, in Westchester, and he came out and everything was wonderful. He was doing super well. He immediately latched to his feeding, but he didn't poop. But that's okay because I also had C-sections because they were both breech, and they said that can be a little bit more common when they have a C-section. About 6 hours into him being born, things started to take a little bit of a turn. He stopped eating, basically refused to take anything. He started just getting a little bit more lethargic. And any mom who's had a child in the NICU or had health problems can probably relate to this. The doctors kept on asking me, well, is he acting differently than his personality? And I remember being so frustrated. I'm like, he's 10 hours old. I have no idea what his personality is like and whether this is normal or not normal. And I just was so frustrated by the system when this was happening because it felt like they were putting the onus back on us versus giving us answers. And then things started to take a turn around, I think, hour 12 or 14, where he started throwing up. They took him to the NICU. They told us actually, when they brought him back from the NICU, and they said he had pooped. And so we're like, okay, we're pretty shocked because we at that point we're like, oh, he definitely has Hirschsprung's. But they were like, nope, he doesn't. He pooped. We're good. So they're gonna do. But then he was still not eating. His stomach's starting to get distended. He threw up again, and this time the throw up was green. And again, we kept on saying it's Hirschsprung's, it's Hirschsprung's, and the pediatrician at that hospital kept on telling us Hirschsprung's is so rare. It is definitely not Hirschsprung's. I mean, use the word definitely not Hirschsprung's with us. And this is a very, very, you know, valid hospital in the New York system, New York State system. And we kept on, I'm also, not even 24 hours post C-section. I'm still probably, have drugs in my system, but we are determined to have them at least acknowledge that this could be Hirschsprung's. But sometime around that day, when he did start throwing up green and some of the tests they were doing were still not, indicating what it was, they decided to basically medevac us to a more serious trauma center. So we were sent to Westchester Medical, which is a children's trauma center in Westchester. I got discharged very quickly. Again, anyone who's going through a C-section knows that the first couple of days you can't move. I basically had to stand up, walk 10,000 steps to make it to the next hospital, so that I could be there with my son. And he ended up being in the Westchester Medical hospital for I think something like 11 days. And it was probably the hardest 11 days of our life because they did not diagnose him until about day 8. Even though again, we kept on saying it's Hirschsprung. It's like, what else could it be? But it's a rare disease. It's a very severe disease. That's what they were telling us. And they didn't want to just jump to that conclusion. So while he was in the NICU there, it's a NICU with like multiple beds. He was in, the trauma room number one. It was both really interesting because he had every tube coming out of him. He obviously, they weren't feeding him anything because they didn't know if he could handle it. They wouldn't let us hold him. But at the same time, he was the quote unquote healthiest baby in this NICU room. And he was really not healthy at that point. And it was a very strange place for us to be, both mentally and physically. We weren't allowed to stay there overnight. We could only go for certain hours. If any kid was going through any type of procedure in the room, everyone had to get kicked out for many hours. So we would show up to the hospital and then be told, oh, the room is actually locked down, come back in 6 hours. And it was a really, I'm in therapy for it now. It was a really horrific couple weeks. But finally, after, barium enemas, after rectal biopsies, after basically every test under the sun, they finally confirmed with us it's Hirschsprung's and said, but at that point, we'd started doing rectal irrigations. We'd started giving him a little bit of milk, which he was taking. And they said, you guys can go home. He has short segment. So just keep on doing irrigations twice a day and come back when he's a little bit older and stronger, whether maybe it's even a couple of weeks, couple of months, and we'll do the pull through surgery there. And at that point, while the nurses were unbelievable at this hospital, I mean, I truly think NICU nurses are just absolute angels walking around this earth. We were not thrilled with some of the care that had been happened. Again, mostly because it took so long for us to get an actual diagnosis. So we started talking to our network, and we are incredibly fortunate that, we basically rung the alarm and all these people came out of the woodwork and were like, I know the head doctor at Yale, I know the head doctor here. And we had everyone calling us, and they connected us to Columbia, where the head pediatric surgeon was very close with Dr. Levitt, who is obviously at Children's. And they kind of took our case over, which was, the best lesson that we could have gotten. And we went to him right after we'd been released. And, they came up with something similar where basically they're like, we agree, we should let him get a little bit stronger. So Remy was home for about, I think, 5 or 6 days. And during that time, he was doing fine. And then on Thursday or Friday of that week, he started getting lethargic again. He stopped eating again. And all of a sudden, he just started throwing up that green bile. And we went to Columbia in New York City. We were immediately admitted to the ER. We had probably the two worst days of our entire life where he was throwing up every 15, 20 minutes, couldn't keep anything down. We were doing constant rectal irrigations. So, and he's 3 weeks old at this point. Um, I'm also, again, 3 weeks postpartum. We have a toddler at home. And we were in the ICU, or we were in actually, I'm sorry, the PICU at that point. And finally, Sunday morning comes around and this doctor comes in and goes, he needs an emergency ileostomy right now. Like it's basically life or death at this point. And so we did it. He got the emergency ileostomy. And that's when they discovered that he actually had total colonic versus short segment.
Wow,
It
that's
was
quite the start,
like
really. I
the
mean,
first 3 weeks of his life.
that is, yeah. I mean, I guess it's symptomatic of Hirschsprungs across the world, but those first few hours, those first few days, weeks in your case as well. I
Yep.
mean, it's just a complete whirlwind of hospital appointments, irrigations,
Yeah.
just everything. I guess one point that you made there, and I know we talked a little bit about it off air, but there is a family history of Hirschsprungs,
Mhm.
and you kept saying, got to think about potentially Hirschsprungs. So you were in, I guess, I don't want to say a fortunate position that you knew what Hirschsprungs was, but I hope you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
But I guess it must be, as you said, really frustrating when people are not. There's a genetic line of Hirschsprungs, yet they're still saying, "Oh well, it's really rare." Did when you kind of mentioned there is a family history, did they acknowledge it, or did you just get the same sort of response? It's rare. We don't think so.
When I was pregnant, basically what my OBs had told me is there's no way to test for it. Looking back now, I think we probably could have pushed them. And we only learned most of this through Remy. Those first 2 weeks when they kept on telling me it's so rare, I I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that Hirschsprung again can be a very severe diagnosis, and they just wanted to rule everything else out. I just don't think they realized what that was doing to us mentally. It made us feel like we were going crazy. It felt like we had to advocate for our children to stop getting a million tests done. The hardest part was when they weren't feeding him. He's 4 days old and they weren't giving him any milk. And as a mom, that's all you want to do is feed your child and make sure they grow. And all they could tell us back was, well, we don't have a definitive answer yet, so we don't want to, jump the gun. Um, I will also say with my husband, so his aunt and uncle both had it, and that was, 60, 70 years ago. So they do not know the extent of how, what they had. But both of them have talked to us and shown us, they have scars all over their stomach. My husband did not get diagnosed until he was about a year old. He was constantly constipated as a baby. His mom kept on bringing him to their pediatrician, who said, Hirschsprung's is not genetic. This is not related. Your kid just has, stomach issues. And about a year, I think something pretty similar happened to Remy at a couple of days where I think he was so bloated and maybe he was throwing up, but he also had to get an ileostomy or colostomy at that point. He had it for a couple months and then he got a pull through. So when we always knew it was a possibility for having kids, his care seemed something that we could easily manage. Like if it was going to be like that, we can do that. Like, yes, we don't want it, but Mark, my husband, lives an incredibly normal everyday life. He's a marathon runner. He, works in finance in the city. We joke that he sometimes has stomach issues, but like it's nothing that impacts his day-to-day life. And so we always thought if our kids do have Hirschsprungs, it will be something similar to Mark, where there'll be maybe a little bit more touch, care in the beginning, but then everything's fine. Remy was really eye-opening for us and just kind of the world of Hirschsprungs.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think I'm very guilty of that as well. Before starting this podcast, I thought, well, Hirschsprung's is just Hirschsprung's, It's
Yeah.
just, it's the condition that I have, but then knowing about long segment and short segment and total colonic and TIA and all of this stuff, I had no idea. And I guess Mark was in a similar situation. He just has Hirschsprung's,
Yep.
rather than different types.
Exactly. I mean, and it's funny now, and I'm sure you feel the same way. I was talking to a mom who's, I think, 3 month old, was just diagnosed with Hirschsprung's, and they're trying to figure out what their path is forward. And we were having this text, we were going back and forth with the different types of surgeries and, the different options. And kind of both took a moment. We're like, this is insane that we can talk like this, that we know all that we're having this conversation about words that we did not know a couple years ago, and that there was this entire field and options, and you become really fluent in it really fast. And it's pretty remarkable with how much as like if you're yourself a patient or a parent of a patient, you kind of have to immerse yourself to really understand what the disease is and the impact that it can have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also on the flip side of that, sometimes when we talk, like when I talk to you about Hirschsprung's and I talk to other people and you talk to other people about Hirschsprung's, we use words like ganglion cells. We use words like total colonic. We use words like enema, and we know what they mean.
Mhm.
But when we talk to 99.9% of the population and you say, what's a ganglion cell? They go, no idea. So we
Yep.
we do end up, and I know I've done this myself, but end up in this bubble
Mhm.
almost of Hirschsprung's chat
Yep.
that we know what everything means by and large, but nobody else does. So then kind of having to explain it to other people is can be a little bit tricky.
It's tricky and it's lonely.
Mm.
That's something I've been really working on this past year is trying to find other families in the New York area that I can connect with because it is a very unique disease. It's a unique set of challenges. I don't think many families travel with irrigation supplies when we go on family trips, and that's something that we have to do every time. And if we travel anywhere we travel, we have to know where the closest children's hospital is because Remy is prone to severe dehydration because he doesn't have a large intestine. And it's just, these are things that you can talk about with your friends and your family, but it's just words. And it's only when you start talking to other people who are going through it that I feel like I can finally almost like relax and let it all out. And every bad and scary thought feels kind of okay talking to it. And so I think, especially as a caregiver of Hirschsprung's, or again, even if you're yourself, finding that network and being able to just have these really honest and raw and candid conversations is really beneficial.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think not enough really is put on what you go through as parents of child with Hirschsprung's and the sort of mental and emotional toll that that takes. I think it's something that I'm trying to do a lot more about in terms of setting up support groups, but I think also it's something that needs to be mentioned a lot more because it's almost and I know that hospitals do a great job in terms of the physical well-being of
Yes.
children, and they do what they need to do because obviously that's the most important thing, getting the child well again, happy again, etc. But the rest of it can sometimes be a bit neglected.
Yeah. I felt very, neglected in those first 2 years. And I will say I give my OB a ton of credit because when Remy was, I think it was post ostomy, and I was really struggling. The idea of changing his ostomy bag completely freaked me out. And I was really having a mental block because I was also very postpartum and I couldn't do it. And I think I couldn't do it because I was scared that I was going to hurt him. And it's also for anyone who's seen what it looks like, it's a little weird looking. And my OB kind of came to me and she called me and she's like, you know what? I've never been one to take a lot of medicine, but she's like, I'm going to put you on an antidepressant. She was like, I think this is a time in your life that you just need every tool in your toolbox. And you can always go off of it. But right now, you are about to enter a really, really hard couple months with taking care of yourself, with taking care of your family, and you need to take care of yourself. And I am so happy that she did that. And I think some people may take that as that was an overstep, but it was a lifeline for me because I was really, really struggling. And I needed that. I needed therapy. I needed friends and family to just like envelop me because I was having a hard time just putting one step in front of the other in figuring out how to have a newborn with a toddler, but also then how to have a newborn with very severe health challenges at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you again for sharing that as well because you're definitely not the only one who has been through this. And I think it's tricky for people to share because they think, am I overreacting? Am I the only one doing this? You see everybody else getting on or supposedly getting on with life. But it having spoken to a lot of parents, a lot of mothers, it happens an awful lot more than people realize, especially as you said, when you have a child diagnosed with, I don't want to say a condition you weren't expecting because you
We
sort
sure
of
were.
were, yeah, but at the same time, I guess it was still a surprise to a certain extent.
The circumstances were not what we expected. We had an idea of what our children's life was going to be like, what our relationship with our child's life was going to be like. And we had that with Emma. And our situation with Remy was just so drastically different. And, that's something I'm working through now, grieving what I feel like we lost in those first couple of weeks and those first couple of months. And, it's really interesting. My sister had a baby last week. And I went and visited her in the hospital, and I was incredibly nervous that it was going to bring up all of these emotions for me because I'm obviously so thrilled for her, and I like love seeing my sister as a mom, but watching her hold her newborn, I'm almost angry. Like I didn't get to do that. I didn't get to bring my child home. I didn't get to hold them and touch them and have these baby cuddles and experiences, and I feel robbed. And that's something that I need to work through, to be the best version of myself, not only for myself, but for my children. So even when you get out of the really scary health situation, and even though we still have a lot of health issues that are going on today, we are out of the scariest part, there's all these things that still kind of you are holding on to, and it's every day is a journey.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that makes absolute sense. And it's a, I don't know whether PTSD is the right word or right phrase in terms of when you go back into that hospital or go back into a hospital, um, and to go and visit your sister and
I
those kind
think
of
it is.
feelings. Yeah,
I actually interesting. I was talking about this where so Remy was in the NICU at this hospital, and in the last year, so whenever Remy now he's 2.5, he had his pull through at 8 months. He had a really healthy year after that. We did the Botox, but for the most part, he had one small bout of enterocolitis, which was really scary. But for the most part, it was like healthy. And then in the last 6 months, he's had 3 hospital visits because he's gotten some type of stomach bug or some type of cold or anything. And with someone with, total colonic who doesn't have a large intestine, we can give him as much Pedialyte as possible. He cannot retain that water. And so he goes from healthy to dangerously dehydrated to the point that one hospital visit, he actually like lost consciousness and they had to do the sternum rub to revive him because he was so dehydrated. And this was only after a couple of hours of being sick. All that to say, we've spent a lot of time in these hospitals, and the hospital itself is on a highway that you have to get to New York City. So I pass it a lot. And there's this time I was passing it, and I could actually feel my entire body tense just seeing the hospital off the side of the highway. And I realized I was like, oh, I am holding on to so much stuff that I need to work this through because I can't have such a visceral reaction every time I see this building because I'm going to see this building multiple times a week for potentially the rest of my life. And it's pretty amazing, just again, like the weight that we are all carrying.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And as I said, you're not the only person that I've spoken to that has been through something similar to this because it's a massive thing that you go through in a short space of time. You haven't got the time to process what you're going through because you're just going through it, or you're just trying to get right. This is the next thing. Okay, there's this procedure. Right. Okay, now we need to do this. Now we need to do that. And there is absolutely no time whatsoever to go through and process and take stock or anything like that, is there?
No, there really isn't, especially in these, hospital visits. We learn things each time we go. I mean, the first time we went in this last year, he'd gotten admitted. And then the second time we learned, okay, we actually have to push them to take his blood in the ER for them to see he's dehydrated for us to get admitted. Again, that was something because we went in when he was feeling sick. They sent us home after giving us Zofran because he started perking up a little bit. And then a couple hours later, we were right back there because he started throwing up again. And so we're like, okay, each time we're learning something new. This time we've learned that the second we think something's wrong, his eyes start to look sunken in. He starts to, he's not peeing as much. He has, his he throws up ever. Like we are pushing them to take his blood and get us those levels so that we can, but it's a learning process. Every day we're learning something new about how to treat it and how to handle it as a family.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of that sort of speaks to those sort of trigger points, doesn't it? Where you go, right, okay, if this happens, then we know that we need to go to the hospital and it's I guess it's a lot of trial and error as well. And a lot
Yes.
of yeah.
Which I hate that word now. I think
Yeah.
anybody who's had to do an ostomy bag, when your kid gets an ostomy bag, they bring in this wound care team, and basically no ostomy bag, uh, pouches fit the same person twice. So they just give me like it's trial and error. It's trial and error. And I'm like, I cannot deal with trial and error. You need to tell me what is going to stay on my son and not leak and just like tell me but then it's the same thing with diaper rash, diaper rashes. It's trial and error about like what will work for your child's skin. And I just, I know that word is right because it was like we found the right ostomy care that worked for him. It was like, Coloplast and this and that. And, we did a mishmash of things. Same thing for his diaper rash. We have like a whole concoction that we do that works for us. But it took us a couple weeks for both of them to figure out. And so I hate when people come to me, they're like, well, how should I treat diaper care? I'm like, "Ugh, trial and error."
Yeah, it's horrible. I know what you mean because everybody wants an answer, don't they? Everybody wants do A, B, and C, and everything will be
Do this.
perfect.
I do not want to be having to question the care that I am given. I go to doctors for doctors to tell me what to do, and I say yes. And that's unfortunately that's not what this disease is. It's a lot of every kid or everybody who has, not even kids, every person who has Hirschsprung is a very different type of experience, and the care is going to be different.
Yeah, most definitely, definitely. And I know we'll move back to Remy's story shortly towards the end. But one thing that I know you wanted to talk about a little bit more is something that's coming up
Yeah,
on mid-October 18th. Am I right saying the
I believe
18th?
so. The Saturday,
Yes,
yes.
the 18th of
Um,
October. Would you
yeah,
like to talk about it?
so one of the things that I've spoken about a lot is that I have an incredibly supportive friends and family. And I also have a job. I work at Roku and my husband works at Bloomberg. And both of our jobs were incredibly understanding when we were going through this with Remy. Not only did they let us take the time that we needed to be with him, but we had friends dropping off food for us. We had people taking care of Emma. We are fortunate enough to be in a financial position that we could spend money on on hotels and flights and anything he needs for diaper rash, we can get. And it just made me so incredibly sad because it is such an expensive disease that how do these families do it? It's kind of something I've been constantly thinking about since Remy was born, that I just don't understand how families are able to handle this if they are not in a situation where they are just, again, surrounded by communities who can just pick up all of the different pieces. And so when Dr. Levitt reached out and said there was this race for every child, that was happening through Children's in DC, I knew that this was going to be the kind of the first time that I wanted to fundraise for this, my own experience. And so we joined the Team Incredibowels, which I cannot take any credit for that name. That is their
Oh,
name.
I thought you'd
Uh,
made it up.
I know I wish I could say it's such a good name. I think they did. But I called Children's and I called Dr. Levitt's colorectal group and I said I would love to fundraise, but I want to be very clear. I specifically want to fundraise to help other families get the care that they need. In the US, there's obviously a ton of great doctors, but I think we can all agree that there are two specialists for colorectal that everyone tends to go to. And if you're not in DC or Cincinnati, it's probably hard to get there. And the Ronald McDonald House can only fit so many people. And I never want cost to be a reason why families are not getting their children the care that they need. And so DC agreed that I could earmark whatever I raised that would go directly to the families to help them travel to see colorectal specialists, to help them with food, to help them with loss of um, job support during that time, to help them again with diaper rash cream and ostomy supplies and anything they need so that they can focus all of their attention on just their children and making sure that they can be as present of the parents as they can without any of the additional stress. And so I started fundraising. And again, it was the first time we'd ever kind of publicly shared Remy's story. And the response has been pretty overwhelming. I think we raised something like 12 or $13,000 in one day. I think we're about over $15,000 now, and it's only been about 4 or 5 days of fundraising. People have just been absolutely lovely, and I that's why I'm here mostly to just continue raising the awareness, continuing building support for families that need it, so that they can be there for their children.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you specifically mentioned that it's going towards families to help with supplies. So it's not just going into, so people know that when they give money to your specific Just Giving
Mhm.
link, that that it is going specifically to families. It's not just going into a pot
Nope.
that helps, every condition under the sun and it's going to the hospital or whatever. Is going to
The
help
family.
families specifically with the
And
supplies.
we talked about it specifically. We'll go for hotel vouchers, meal vouchers. They're going to start writing like Visa credit cards that they can give to families to help cover diapers. I mean, again, as someone with a kid with Hirschsprung's, the amount of diapers we buy each week is actually like we support the Pampers business
You
in our
hold them up.
household alone. They, if we go away, they're going out of business. But diapers are expensive, and there's so much. And again, like even outside of that care, the when Remy gets sick and we have to go to the hospital 4 days, a lot of people do not have the luxury to do that. And I just every time we're there, my heart is breaking because it's just again, Remy is the healthy kid a lot of the times in these hospital situations. And it just anything we can do to help others.
Definitely. And we've mentioned about fundraising, what the fundraising is for, how people are going to fundraise, and we'll share the link in a second. But what are you actually doing to fundraise?
Um, Not much yet. It kind of
Oh,
I
right. Is there not a
so
race going on?
like what's actually happening? Like what are
Yes,
the
yeah, that one.
yes. Oh, I was like, right now I've shared on a lot of my channels.
No.
We so this race for every child is in October and it's a 5K for adults, but then it's actually like a kids dash. So Remy and Emma will be dressing up and doing a dash and racing with all these other children who are not only impacted by colorectal issues, but kind of any type of disease that children's in DC. So I saw, I think there was a pediatric oncology group. There was there's any type of pediatric disease. And it's just, I think, going to be a really lovely day. And kind of, again, going back to just finding opportunities to be with people who are in similar situations, other parents, other kids, Remy meeting other kids who maybe have an ostomy bag now. And we can say that, you had this for about a year. That's really important for me to, show him that he's not alone and, show him his scar and that other kids have that similar scar. So I think it's gonna be a really lovely day.
Definitely. And I love that as well when you say to make sure that or to for Remy to know that he's not alone because I that's something that is so important to me and so important that yes, you can always say it's 1 in 5,000 or whatever the
Mhm.
figure for Hirschsprungs is at the moment. But to actually meet people who have ostomy bags, who have Hirschsprungs, is so important. Having been there myself, it's yeah, incredibly important. And I know you mentioned Mark is a marathon runner. Is
Yes.
he taking part in the 5K as well?
I'll probably tell him that he should. I mean, well,
Okay,
yes, I'm going to make him do it.
good,
He,
good.
he can run 5K. He should be fine.
Well,
No, I think it's, going back to that, there's two things that I'm really focused on right now. It's one, making sure Remy knows that he's not alone and not treating him like a sick kid, but also doing the work for my daughter. I never want her to think that our attention is only towards Remy. I want them to both feel equally loved and, the attention on both of them. And so it's a really, I'm sure a lot of families go through this where you're kind of trying to balance it all. And it's something we're again working through every day is how do we not treat him like a sick kid, but also not make Emma feel like all of our attention is going to him when sometimes it needs to.
yeah, and I guess that can be a really difficult balance, and it's one of the things, like you said, a lot of parents that I speak to have children who are quote unquote normal and healthy, and have children that have Hirschsprungs, and you do have to be at hospital appointments a
Yep.
lot, and you do have to be at surgeries a lot, and I guess that can be difficult to understand if you are the child without Hirschsprungs, I guess.
Yep. And one piece of advice that actually a mom who has a son who has Hirschsprung's, her son now is like, I think 35, married with his own kids. But I was talking to her about this real concern I had of that us, neglecting Emma in some way when Remy was born and when we were living out of the hospitals. And she basically said, with your other children, all they care about is that they are surrounded by love. And so when you're away with Remy, just anything you can do to envelop her in love, whether it be from grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, that is what she's going to remember from that time, not that you weren't there. And it's really stuck with me because I really go into overdrive now whenever we have these. There was a day a couple months ago when we had to immediately take Remy to the hospital because he had one of his bouts of dehydration. And I texted a group of moms in the town I live in, and I basically said, we have to take Remy. Can people help me with Emma? And all of a sudden, one mom was like, okay, dinner will be at the hospital here. I will pick Emma for a play date here. And Emma had the best couple days of her life. I mean, she was just like, she got to be with her best friends for a couple days. And it was just, that's what she's going to remember from that period. That she all these people around her were just like, surrounding her and giving her love. And she's not going to remember that we were gone with Remy. And that's all I really want.
Yeah. But that's such a good idea, though. It's such a good idea and obviously having the community in which to do that is so helpful.
It really is.
Yeah, I can imagine having people and just being able to text and go, could you just pick this up for me? Could you just, take care of this or that or the other? I imagine is, yeah, a
No,
lifesaver.
my brother and my sister-in-law live 9 minutes away. Emma's favorite thing is doing sleepovers there. So we can always say, sleep over with the cousins. And, again, that's what she's thinking about that night. She's not thinking about the fact that, and we don't want her to know what's going on with Remy a lot of times. She's 4.5 and she doesn't need to know what he's going through at this point.
Yeah, and I guess as well, go back to sort of the rest of your family. They know what Hirschsprung's is, having had multiple members of the family have different types of Hirschsprungs. So they know what Hirschsprung's is. They know that you have to spend, a reasonable amount of time, especially when you're younger, back and forth to hospital. So I guess they're probably more understanding the most.
Oh my gosh, they've been unbelievable. Yeah, Mark's mom, who, that's her family lineage that it kind of comes down. So it's her two siblings, and she was really there as a caregiver for her two siblings whenever Remy's in the hospital. Some people get squeamish about hospitals, they get squeamish about things that come along with it, but like she just, can walk right into any medical situation and is there and is the support system, and it's pretty fantastic. I think the only thing that's really like put Mark and I over the edge was when he had the ostomy, he prolapsed a few times. I think that's the fun thing that's like actually, I was like, I'm not a squeamish person. I think we both almost fainted.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably one of those things. I have seen it before, but it's one of those things that I don't think you can really prepare for. Like it just happens,
Yeah,
and yeah, I can't imagine anybody because I can't imagine anybody really. They talk about wound care and they talk about this and they bring in the
I was not
ostomy
prepared
cube,
for that.
and there's probably nobody that goes, ah, yes, a prolapse looks like this.
No.
No,
And it's actually a funny story. So we go to this place. It's called Block Island. It's this tiny little island off of Rhode Island. There's no hospital. I mean, it's 13 miles long. It's tiny. And we went there when Remy had an ostomy because everything had been fine. And it was Memorial Day, Saturday night at 9 p.m. and he prolapsed for the first time on this tiny island. And I mean, like, we basically fainted. I mean, we didn't know what to do. We're like, are we gonna have to helicopter off this island? And so we called our surgeon at that time, at Columbia, and we are just like sobbing. Like, I mean, we are so scared. Everyone is pretty freaked out. And he's like, don't worry about it. Put some sugar on it. Throw him in the bath, put some sugar on it, and have a glass of wine. And we're like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, put some sugar on it. And we did, and it went back in. And I will say that's the only time it went back in. The other times it happened was not as easy, and we actually did require surgical care. But it was just like it was this laughable moment because we are, I mean, truly the lowest of lows. And he's just like, sugar, it's all you need. Like, what is medicine at this point?
yeah, you're thinking you need a surgical team to come. No, actually, what you need to do is just go down the shop and get some sugar. Like
Sugar,
that was
the
all you
plastic,
needed.
and then put the plastic bag back on top of it. I'm like, we've done really well in the medical field.
Yeah, yeah. All of the medicine that he's on and all of the surgical things you think you need, you just need a bag of sugar.
Yep. So it was I'm glad that that was kind of the outcome of the first prolapse, but it was pretty funny.
But then you'd rather have that than going, yeah, we need to go to hospital, we need to get an ambulance, we need to all of this.
Yes,
Just
which was
bit
unfortunate.
of
The next
bit
two
of
times,
sugar.
sugar did not help the next two times.
No. Well, yeah, it's been a 33% success rate
I
isn't
know
bad for
exactly.
for a
There you
little bit of
go.
sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
And just while we've got sort of 5 more minutes or so, in terms of future for Remy, what do you see for his future?
I think he is going to have an unbelievable childhood and adulthood and live an incredibly vibrant life. I recognize that we are in a hard period right now. His body's learning how to adapt without having, the large intestine, and there's definitely a lot of challenges We're starting our bowel management program and potty training and what that will look like and having aides in school. And I recognize the next couple of years are just, they're going to be hard. And, but again, I think at the end of the day, my husband and I, we are just so focused on making sure he is happy and having as much of a, quote unquote normal, because he is normal. And I hate using the word not normal, but,
Yeah.
a normal childhood. He went to camp this summer. He's starting pre-K twos in the fall. And it just requires more attention from us. It requires us talking to his teachers and the camp counselors, but that's something that we're willing to do. And if they're willing to do it, then I'm just, that's all I could ask for. So I think he's just going to be, honestly, I think we're going to end up in the hospital more because he is just a boy and loves jumping off things and throwing himself against walls and being just pure boy. So, that's what I
It's gonna
want.
happen.
It's gonna happen. Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
We're gonna walk in there like,
Um,
oh, Remy again, broken arm. Great. Like,
yeah, yeah. Well, broken arms are fine. Like,
please.
once you've dealt with Hirschsprungs and you've dealt with surgeries, a broken finger, broken arm,
Well, I
no
was
problem.
so on Friday, it was his last day of camp, and he loves camp. I mean, loves it. And it was like running in, was so excited. All of his friends were there, and he just tripped, and all four of his teeth went into his lip, and one of his tooth shifted, and there was blood everywhere, like all over me, all over him. And I like took him to the bathroom. We realized we had to go to the dentist to see if he needed stitches. He didn't. Again, he's boy. And but every parent like called me, they're like, we were so shooken up. You were so calm in that situation. Like how, and I was like, you don't understand what I've said. Like little teeth, a little lip, fine, all good. Like this is nothing compared to things I've seen out of this child. Like this is cosmetic. We will figure this out.
Yeah,
But
yeah, definitely. Well, once they've listened to this episode, then they'll know quite why you were so calm.
exactly why I was just like, oh, please, he'll be fine.
Fantastic. Well, it's obvious that Remy's got a great support system around it. And that is so good to hear. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And I wish you, wish Remy, and Mark, obviously with his Hirschsprungs as well, all and all the rest of your family, all the very best for the future.
No, I really appreciate that. And thank you for doing this podcast and for bringing attention to this. Again, it is something that many people have not heard about. And even if it's just for other Hirschsprung families to listen to what other people are going through, it's incredibly beneficial. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing.
My pleasure.